Hey guys, Rick Stone here from Stony Acres Gardening. How are you? Welcome, welcome. I'm glad to have everybody here. I just thought that I would jump on and do a little bit of a live broadcast today, maybe give you a little bit of an update on my onion seedlings and talk a little bit about seed starting. I actually had some viewers who submitted questions on Monday in our community, and I'm going to answer a few of those while I'm here today as well. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this. I haven't been live for quite a few months, maybe 4 or 5 months, and so I thought I would just jump on today, say hello, and just let everybody know that I'm still alive. So if you guys, looks like we've already got 20 or so people here, which is awesome, especially for something that I just barely announced. Jump in the chat if you want. Maybe give me a few minutes here to talk about a few things, and then we will, I'll actually even answer some questions if you guys have some seed starting questions as well. Okay, the first thing that I wanted to chat just really quickly about, guys, is my seed starting workshop that's coming up. So mid-February is the date on that. This is our 8-day event that we do every year. So this will be the 4th season that we have done this workshop. It's a lot of fun. It's not a live event, so it's pre-recorded so that you're able to watch each day's content when it fits your schedule. So we'll do 7 days of teaching. I do about 25 to 40 minutes of teaching each day, kind of depends on the day. There's a workbook that goes along with it, homework assignments that you guys can do, and that's going to be starting in mid-February. And so today is what I'm asking is if you're interested in this seed starting workshop, that you get signed up for the wait list. So in the description of this video, there is a link that you can click on that will take you over so that you can sign up for the wait list. That just kind of helps me know how many people we're going to have. Last year, we had about 275 people that joined. This year, we're thinking it's going to be even more than that based on, my audience has grown. So we want to kind of have a good idea of how many people are going to be there. So signing up for the wait list doesn't commit you to anything, but it helps me to know that I'm going to have a certain number of people there. That way I can get enough prizes for the prize drawing and all of that kind of stuff as well. So sign up for that wait list. The link is down in the description of this video. So super excited about that. Like I say, 4th year that we've done this. It's very inexpensive too. It's only $29. So if you're interested, please get signed up for that wait list. Okay. All right. I didn't want this to be a whole salesy video. So I did want to kind of give you guys a little bit of an update. So a week ago, it's actually been 12 days ago. So it was not last Friday, but the Friday before, I did a video on planting onion seedlings indoors. And I wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of a live update so that you can see how things are going with these seedlings. So these are 12 days old. And I've got 2 containers, 2 of the containers. We actually planted 6 total. We've got some bunching onions and we've got some red onions that we're growing. And I thought you guys might be interested to see how they have come along in just a few days. So there you go. That's 12 days worth of growth. Michelle Smith is asking, do onion seeds need to germinate in the dark? And the answer to that question is no, they do not need to germinate in the dark. You can just go ahead and put them in under your lights. Mine actually had lights from day one because I've got a few other things like this. We've got some kale. These were planted about a week before these were. And so I already had the lights on. So these guys started out under the lights completely. So these are the bunching onions that you can see. Let's see if you guys can get that to focus. Yeah. There's still a few, like right here, we're just starting to get germination on some. So these are kind of still coming up. These are the red onions, and it looks like I only put about 6 or 8 in each of these containers, and it looks like they're up and running. So pretty impressive after just 12 days. That's one of the fun things about seed starting is you get to see results fairly quickly. So these guys, you can see these are actually already starting to get a little tall. I'm going to let them go maybe another week. They'll get maybe about this tall, and then I'm actually just going to trim them off. So you'll cut them back, and you'll do this several times during the growing process. You'll just kind of trim these guys back to about that height, and then they'll grow again. You trim them back again. These guys will stay indoors for a total of about 10 weeks. So the plan is, weather allowing, these guys will get planted out about the 1st of April. maybe the last week of March, somewhere in that time zone is when we'll be getting these out in the garden. So they've got about 8 more weeks. So as you can see, with just 12 days growth, they've already grown pretty high. So we'll just trim those guys right off here in another week or so, and they'll kind of just continue to grow and come back. So anyways, I thought I would give you guys just a little bit of an update on those. Looking pretty good. Pretty excited about that. The other thing that I wanted to do today is I posted a question in the community, in my YouTube community, and asked people if they had any seed starting questions that they wanted answered. And several people posted questions. And so I've got some questions here that I'm going to answer. And then, if, depending on how, I don't want to go all afternoon. Maybe we'll go, it's going to take me about 10 minutes to answer these questions. Maybe we'll go another 5 minutes afterwards if you guys want to stay, and I can answer any more questions. Let me just look. I'm just looking right now. Sorry, I have to kind of gaze off here in the distance. Is there any benefit to planting so few seeds per cell? I put 4 to 5 times more than that. Well, so these are bunching onions, and there's right now there's 8 that have come up. There's 2 or 3 more that I can see that are just getting started. That's about all I want in a bunching onion. Now, these are just going to go, the whole thing is just going to get planted as is in the ground, okay? These are going to get pretty big. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in here. That's good for me. So I've got 6 cups of these. Each of them have about 8 to 10. For this variety, this is a red, and that's about all that we need is, 24, 25 onions. And so that's basically all I need. And so that's not taking up a lot of space. And so, yeah, that for me, that's kind of an ideal planting. And I like to do them in these little cups. Other people will do them in big trays. That's awesome too. The onions are real flexible, real easy to do. And so, do, what works best for you. But any more than 8 to 10 seeds, I would want a bigger container. So I would go a little bit bigger if I were going to plant more than that in a thing, because by the time these guys get relatively decent size, they're going to be crowding themselves pretty good. And we want them to have, a little bit of growing room. Obviously, we're not growing them to maturity there, but we still want them to have some space. Okay. Let's answer one of the questions that was submitted by the community, and then maybe I'll go back to the chat. So Jamie asked, sorry, I'm looking here on my phone. This is my first time starting seeds. When your tray starts to germinate, at what point do you remove the humidity dome if some of the cells are not germinating? Okay, so Jamie, this is a really good question. First off, in my method, I don't use a humidity dome. I don't like humidity domes. And here's the reason why. They're too tall. So humidity domes are 3, sometimes I've even seen them like 4 inches tall. That prevents you from getting the lights down really close. Now, if you have a grow light, so if you've got a really fancy, high-powered grow light, then you're fine. You could have a humidity dome on there, but I don't use grow lights. I just use shop lights. So I just have simple LED shop lights. So I need to have those down pretty close to the surface of my plants. We're talking about 2 inches away from those plants when they germinate. And so a humidity dome gets in the way of that. And so if you've got a humidity dome on there, you can't get those lights down close enough, you'll get leggy plants. And so instead, I use just plastic wrap. So I just put a little plastic wrap over the top. I reuse those pieces year after year after year. So, and it doesn't have to be plastic wrap. It can be basically anything that you want that's some kind of plastic that's just going to kind of hold that moisture in. And then the answer to your question is we want to take that off as soon as those plants start germinating. So that's another advantage of using a plastic wrap instead, because you can kind of shuffle those plants around, move the ones that have started germinating over into a corner and uncover them, but leave the rest of those covered. Because once they've germinated, we don't want them to be in that moist, humid environment. Instead, we want them to be out in the open air so that we don't get any disease issues. So using the plastic wrap instead of a humidity dome allows you to be a little bit more flexible when you have things that are germinating at different times. You can kind of just shuffle those trays or those containers around in your tray and keep some of them covered, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. Good question, Jamie. One of the other questions that I had was, and this is actually from somebody that's relatively close to us here. So they live in Tooele, Utah, which is basically over the mountain from us. It's about 50 miles from us, but same latitude almost exactly. And they're asking, with their last frost date being right around the end of April, when would I transplant cold hardy plants out into the garden if I have frost covers for protection? And so this is Horse Gal asked that question. And Horse Gal, the answer to that question is about 4 weeks before your last frost date. So here we're talking about cool season crops that are hardy. So broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, lettuce, kale, collards, any of those that you have transplants that you're growing inside, you can put them out about 4 weeks before your last frost date if you've got a little something to protect them with. That can just be a frost blanket. It could be a hoop house or a cold frame, but you ought to be able to get those in about 4 weeks before your last frost date, and that will give you a good head start on that cool season time of the year. Helen is asking, how often should we fertilize our onions and once they've sprouted, and what do you do? What do I use to fertilize them with? So this is about the stage where I want to start fertilizing. So these are 12 days. They've started to stand up. They're shedding their, some of them have already started to shed the seed. There's, that one still got one. Some of them still do, but they've started to shed those seeds. They're about 12 days old. Now is the time to start fertilizing them. And it's what I do to fertilize is I use a liquid fertilizer, and we are going to mix that into our water. And then we're just going to water our plants as normal with that liquid fertilizer. And you're going to do that about every week to 10 days. So for me, that works out to be about every other time I water. For you, that might be a little bit different because you could live in a drier area. You may be in a more humid area. But basically, we're targeting somewhere around that 8 to 10 day time frame. About every 8 to 10 days, you want to give them some fertilizer. So for me, that works out. I'm watering about every 4 days. So every other time I water with fertilizer. And she asked what I'm using. I've kind of explored. My favorite thing to use to fertilize seedlings is fish emulsion. So I have a 5-1-1 fish emulsion that I love. The problem is that I've moved my seed starting setup inside. In fact, it's right here. It's just next door to where we're sitting. And I can't use fish emulsion anymore because it stinks, okay? So it's been a couple of years since I have moved indoors, and I've been exploring and experimenting with different liquid fertilizers to try and come up with one that's organic but still works, okay? So I've tried one called Turbo Organics, and that one was fine. I've tried the Miracle Grow organic fertilizer. Again, fine. It was all right. This is what I'm experimenting right now. So this is by Mighty Plant, and it's called Organic Growth Plant Food, and it's an 822. We want the higher 8. That's the nitrogen number. That's what we want for seedlings. So far now, I have to confess that I've only used these on one set of seedlings. So I've got some seedlings that I'm growing right now that are kind of out of season. I was using them for a demonstration video that we did last week. That's the only ones that I've used on them. But so far, this fertilizer is acting like my fish emulsion was. So I'm happy with it. I've only run one batch through, but I'm happy with this guy. So you can get this. You can buy it directly from Mighty Plant. They're the manufacturer. Or you can get it from True Leaf Market. So True Leaf Market sells it as well. And it's just a powder. You mix a teaspoon into the water, and then you can just bottom water your plants using that. So that's what I use for that. Helen also wanted to know what I use for soil. I always, for seed starting, use seedling mix. So we don't want to use a potting mix for a couple of different reasons. The first is it can be too rough. But even if you sift it, there can be some other problems. With potting mixes, they're not as careful with pest issues as they are with a seedling mix. With a seedling mix, they want to make sure that because they know it's going to be indoors, it's going to be in this confined area. They want to make sure they don't have any pests in them. With potting mixes, they're not as careful. So if you use a potting mix, you have a much greater risk of bringing a pest in, like aphids, white flies, fungus gnats, things like that could come in a lot easier with potting mixes. So I always use a seedling mix when I'm starting my seedlings. And then the last of the user submitted or viewer submitted questions was from Cynthia. And this is a really good one. She says, do I have to worry about how many hours of daylight for my onion seedlings? I know that onions are day length sensitive and I don't want them to bulb as babies. Okay. This is a really good question, Cynthia, and one that you don't need to worry about. Okay. Because at this stage and all the way through the growth stage when they're going to be indoors, they are not day length sensitive yet. Okay. So I have never had a problem with my onions trying to bulb when I'm growing them indoors. I've never had them bulb prematurely when I put them out in the garden also. So I just put my onions with all the rest of my seedlings, and that means that they get 16 hours of light under my artificial light a day. And it does not affect them at this stage. Once they get a little bit bigger and you get them out in the garden, then day length is important. But at this phase of growing with onion seedlings, day length is not a consideration that you need to worry about. Now, if you are absolutely obsessed with it and completely worried, then you could cut your time under lights down to 12 hours and your onions would probably still be okay. But that's going to affect some of your other seedlings. So you would probably want to have your onions under their own light in that case. But I have never had a problem with 16 hours of sunlight. And everything that I've been able to find to read on it says is that seedlings are not going to be affected by day length yet. And so you don't need to fuss about, only having your intermediate or your long day onions and making sure that they only have 12 hours of light. It's just not something you need to worry about. Okay. All right. So those were the viewer submitted questions. So those were all really good ones. We're about 16 minutes in. Why don't we kind of go another few minutes? Let me look and see if we've got any other questions here. So Jen is asking, do the seed shells on the tips cause any problems, or do I just leave them alone? So is what she's talking about here is these little seeds that are right here. They do not cause any problems. They also come off very easily once we get to this stage. So if you want to, you can just pull them off. If they fight you, don't worry about it. They're not going to cause an issue. And the reason why they're not going to cause an issue is because we're going to get, another week into this, and these are going to be so tall that we're going to want to cut them off anyways. So we're going to just trim those onions right off, and those seed tops will go away completely. By the way, you can use those if you want to use those tops as like a little flavoring or something. Kind of will act like a chive. But you can definitely use those tops when you trim them off. And especially as they get a little bit further along, they get to a little bit bigger stage, and you can definitely use those to eat as well. Karen. So Karen's asking, I got my onion seeds in seed starting containers just a few days ago. When I plant them out this spring, will they be small bulbs? No, they will just basically have a little bit of a root structure to them. And they should not be very big. I wish I had a way to put a picture up of a mature looking one, but they won't start to bulb yet. So no, you'll just kind of have a long plant. You just separate. So this container will be thick and big with bigger plants in it, and you just kind of dump it out and separate them fairly gently. But onions are actually not all that sensitive. You can be fairly rough with them. So you'll just kind of dump this soil out, separate them, and plant them out in your garden. And they won't have much of a bulb. They'll have a root structure, and you can see where the bulb's going to develop, but there won't be much of a bulb there at all. All right, let's see. Nerd Fighting Fat is the name. Neptune Harvest doesn't smell too bad. Actually, that's the variety of fish emulsion that I use, and boy, we could not. We tried it in the house. No, we ended up having to take the seedlings outside in the garage for a week until they kind of aired out. So I've just found that all of the fish emulsions do not really do that. Kat is asking, can you use compost to start your seeds? So Kat, the answer to that is sort of. If you want to use some compost, number one, it should be your compost. Store-bought compost is too rough. It's going to be full of wood chips, and it's just not good stuff. Store-bought compost is great if you want to put it out in the garden, but it's too rough and too much wood in it. If you've grown your own compost, cooked your own compost, then you can use it for seed starting. The problem with it is you're introducing a living ecosystem, basically, into your seed starting setup, which normally I wouldn't say that's a bad thing. We want that living, those microbes, those organisms all, in our soil. But when we're starting seedlings, everything is so concentrated. We're just in these little cups and we're indoors. It's warm, it's more moist. Using compost can cause some issues. Now, not always. And I have grown in straight compost before and have had good success. But it just depending on the year and the batch, you can have lots of fungal issues. You could bring in pests like aphids and gnats and things like that. And so I usually will go with a seedling mix and stay away from compost, save the compost for the garden. Now, if you want to put a little bit of compost or maybe some worm castings into your seedling mix, that would be okay. Maybe 1 part to every 8 part of seedling mixes. That would be fine. But again, you risk bringing in what is normally a good thing out in the garden. It's a good thing to have all of those microbes and everything, but you bring those in and stick them in a container, and it can sometimes be a real problem because we're kind of moving out of nature to get our seedlings started early, to cheat and get started early. And so we're kind of in a little odd environment that can sometimes be some problems with compost. A lot of people still have good success, but it really depends on the year. Okay. Okay. Just looking through here. All right. So Angela is saying, I'm in Maryland, zone 7, and she plans on starting her onions this weekend. Last week in April is our last frost date. Is it okay to put them in the ground in early April? Absolutely. That's perfect timing. I like to try and get my onions out in the garden 4 to 6 weeks before my last frost date. So Angela, I would almost say you're not too late, but next year you could start sooner. Okay. So my last frost date is May 15th. And I've already started. So get them started this weekend. You're not too late, but you could be sooner. So next year, plan on starting them sooner. But yeah, target right there, end of March, 1st of April is when you want to be getting those out if that's what your frost date is. Yeah, the onions look just like grass. Kat's saying she does make her own compost, so that is a little bit better. Helen is saying, would it benefit potting onions up in potting mix to grow larger bulbs before transplanting? No, Helen, your onions are not going to grow bulbs. Okay, they won't grow any bulbs while they're indoors. The trigger for growing a bulb won't come until much later in the season. Like for most of us, that trigger usually comes when the day length, it depends on the variety we're growing, but when the day length gets longer and the temperatures change, that's what triggers them to bulb. And so we don't want them to bulb. Okay. We don't want really big, super big plants. We don't need to pot them up. They can just be in a clump because we're going to take them out and plant them early and let them do their growing out in the garden. So you really don't need to worry about potting up or anything like that. Okay. How do you know your onion seedlings are ready to transplant? Give them a good solid 8 to 10 weeks. Honestly, though, I mean, these could be transplanted right now. It would just take a long time for them to grow, out in the garden. And obviously, it's not the right time of year yet to plant. But 8 to 10 weeks is usually kind of the timing that you want to target. And then doesn't really matter what their size is. Get them out at the right time. So about 4 to 6 weeks before your last frost date, get them out in the garden and you should be good. Really doesn't matter what size. These will catch up. So I'm also gonna buy seedlings from Dixondale Farms. Those are gonna be much bigger. Okay, those seedlings will be much bigger because they pump them up with fertilizers and everything. But these will catch up to those onions and they'll all be ready about the same time. So just give them a good solid 8 weeks or 10 weeks if you can indoors and get them out, and they'll transplant pretty much anytime. Okay. Um, do I think Spring K is saying, do I think there's anything with planting and sowing with the moon? So this is a really good question. Um, no, I don't. Um, but I also have not studied it. I will admit that I haven't done a lot of study on it. So I am a skeptic when it comes to zodiac and moon planting and things like that. I'm very much a skeptic. I come from master gardener programs and things like that are all kind of agricultural study based, scientific based, and so I don't really lend a lot to that. You could study it and see how it goes, but I'm a skeptic. I will say that. Okay, Moria is saying, can you sterilize the seedling soil or compost before you plant? With, for example, with boiling water. Okay, that's a good question. Yes, and if you have had pest problems in the past, you should do that. I mean, you should also sterilize your containers. So clean your containers really well and sterilize them before you plant in them. There is so much living in compost that I don't know that boiling water would kill all of it. Okay, it would probably kill your pest issues. So you could definitely give it a try and see. I have experimented pretty extensively over the last year with compost in differing ratios, straight compost, different mixes and stuff. And I haven't been overly impressed. The results that I get with my seedling mix are pretty much the same as I get with the compost. And I've had less issues with fungus and pests when I don't have compost involved in the process. So, but you could definitely try sterilizing it and see what happens. Do onion seedlings need to be hardened off? Yes, you should probably give them a week of hardening. Onions are pretty hardy, though. They're actually a fairly hardy transplant. Sorry, my voice is getting scratchy. They're a fairly hardy transplant, but you should still give them a week. So, maybe 4 hours the first day, 6 hours the next day. Those first 2 or 3 days are probably mostly going to be in the shade. Then you're going to move them more out into the sunshine and extend that amount of time. But it's always a good idea to harden them off. I would say hardening off with onions is probably less important than it is with some other plants, but it's always a good idea to harden off because you're taking them from, for me, it's 70 degrees in my house. First part of April, when I'm planting my seedlings outside, it's probably going to be 50 degrees most days, still getting freezing at night. Sometimes we're having snow. And so that's a pretty big shock for those plants. And so it's always a good idea to harden. It's not that tough to do. Just set them out before you go to work, put them in the shade for the first few days and then make them out in the sun, the next. Just make sure you water them and you should be okay. So Maury is saying, I'm planting to experiment this year with lunar plantings, and it's probably the only way I'll know for sure. So yeah, that's good. We planted garlic during the eclipse in October. Okay, so people here are talking about the moon planting again. Okay, last question here is from Moon. When should I plant potatoes in zone 9? Okay, I'm in zone 6B. And so I'm not 100% sure what to tell you. I will tell you that I plant my potatoes about, but both sweet and regular potatoes. Good. That's good clarification. I plant my potatoes about 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks before my last frost date is when I start planting potatoes. Now I plant all the way up until past my frost date so that I have kind of staggered plantings. But about 4 weeks before my last frost date, you may or may not have a last frost date. And so for you, it's probably about now, but I'm speculating because you're not my zone. So I'm kind of speculating there. With sweet potatoes, they're frost sensitive. So you absolutely have to wait until after the last frost date and till the temperatures are warm, significantly warm. So we want your temperatures to be 65, 70, 80 degrees, in that range before you're planting. I don't plant my sweet potatoes until about the 1st of June, when we have really moderated. There's no chance of frost. So you are going to be a whole bunch different in Moon. I'm sorry. I don't live in, and haven't ever lived in zone 9. So I can't tell you exact dates. I'd encourage you maybe to go on your website in your area and look for your local agricultural college. For us, it's Utah State University. Not sure what area you're in, but look for them, and they should be able to give you some advice, because you don't have as much of the frost issue that we have. And so your planting times are going to be considerably different than ours. So I would definitely do a little local research. Okay. All right, guys, I think that is it. Thank you. We've had a good crowd, 77 people here right now. Before you go, make sure that you get signed up for my seed starting workshop. So we've got the wait list going right now. There's a link in the description of this video that you can click on. Once I've gone from not being live, if you're watching this in a replay, there'll be a link up here that you can click on as well. Basically, this workshop is a 7-day event. We do 7 days of classes. They're all pre-recorded so that you can watch them at your leisure. And then we do, on the day 8, we do a live Q&A session where I answer questions. We go through basically the whole seed starting process from start to finish and teach you over those 7 days how to grow your own seedlings. It's a really fun event. We do it every year. Last year we had 275 people that participated. This year we're thinking it's going to be more like 400 or 500. So it's a great crowd, fun thing to join. And right now, if you get on the wait list, that helps us plan. The plan is we're going to be going mid-February. We don't have a solid date yet. It'll either be the 12th or the 19th that we're starting. So if you get your name on that wait list by signing up down below, then we will be able to email you and let you know when it's going to start. And it's a very inexpensive event. It's only $29 for the whole 8 days. We've got some prize drawings at the end and some fun things happening there. So make sure that you get signed up for that as well. Okay. All right, guys, this was fun. Thank you for your participation today. I was just going to see, Holly's asking, where do you sign up if we're in the Gardening Academy? Holly, you don't need to worry about it. You'll get an email. So I'll send you an email and it just shows up in the Gardening Academy. It will just show up on the day that we launch. So Holly, you won't need to worry about signing up. It'll just happen for you. Okay. All right, cool. Link down in the description to sign up for that seed starting workshop. And please go get signed up. Okay. Thanks, guys. Happy gardening. We'll see you. I've got a video that'll be coming out on Friday, and we'll try and jump in. This was kind of fun for just a little casual half hour of gardening chat. So thank you. All right. Happy gardening, guys. We'll talk to you later. See ya.